But I would like to introduce you, I think we have very good two last interventions. One is going to be this, as a closing keynote, we have the pleasure to have Nerea Calvillo. Nerea Calvillo is an architect, a scholar. She's based at the Research Center of Interdisciplinary Methodologies in the University of Warwick. She's director of Spatial Design of its S++ Architects and founder of In the Air, an ongoing collaborative project to sense air pollution. She works at the intersection between spatial design, feminist technoscience, queer and environmental studies, and her current research is on toxic politics. I think it's a huge topic. So she works also recently in AI, natures, atmospheres, and queer urban political ecologies. And her work has been exhibited, probably most of you know, at the Venice Architecture Biennale, at the Royal Academy of Arts, at the Canadian Center for Architecture, or the Shanghai Biennale. She has published a lot of in a lot of interdisciplinary journals like Social Status of Science, Journal of Extreme Events, or Public Culture, and she's an author of a very nice book, Aeropolis, Queering Air and Toxic Polluted Worlds. Nerea, please. Thank you.
Well, is it okay? First of all, thank you so much, Tervadia, Pau, and All Starts organization for putting together this amazing symposium, and also for a really welcoming and precise infrastructure that is really appreciated. So today I am going to be wearing 3 different hats at the same time, or all together, or maybe how I have managed to navigate them, probably. One is as a researcher, and I'm at this place called Center for Interdisciplinary Methodologies, which is perfect because no one asks, what do you do? However, I collaborate with people that are all the time asking me, so what actually they don't ask, they just assume that I do everything that they don't do. So it's a kind of interdisciplinarity that we have been seeing very often, how having flexible skills probably is considered as having none or having all the rest. Then as a spatial designer, so I'm an architect, I build things, and this is very often at odds with academic research. And last but not least, I was the initiator of In the Air, which I'll speak about a little bit later. So we've been speaking about the intersection between arts, science, technology, and society. But what is an intersection? And this is something that I was wondering, it's something that kept me wondering after Chris Salter's talk, where he was speaking about how he was speaking about this complex intersection already, and he even mentioned only within artistic research, it's already not quite clear what we're talking about. So if we start bringing together arts and sciences, and we keep adding technology and society or societies, then which kind of intersection do we get? And I think that we are assuming that an intersection can take place. So in mathematics, In mathematics, an intersection is the set of elements that two or more sets have in common. But do any of these have anything in common? And what we've been seeing is that they actually don't. So they are radically different spaces. Very often we call them disciplines, but actually disciplines are much more than the methods that we use. Of course, this is obvious, but we've seen how belonging to the art world requires different temporalities, different challenges, different interlocutors. And each of the previous ones has different problems, methods, practices, expectations, evaluation processes, timings, and world-making capacities. We've also been hearing how difficult it is to do something across or somewhere in between these. So I would like to propose a different way of understanding them. And maybe instead of using intersections, which it feels like too clear, too simple, as if you just put two things together and they comfortably merge or come together. What if we think about them as different galaxies that have their own systems? How about we think about these ways of navigating these intersections as encounters or frictions or even as battlefields? Because very often they are battlefields in practice, and we've heard this over and over these 2 years. I've also liked the concept of zones of contact, which we heard this morning, or diversion, with Guillemette Legend proposed. But still, what is this space for us when we are in it? Is it a field, a practice, a product, a transit zone, as Tere Badia suggested yesterday, and I love the concept, a transit zone, but then who's transiting where, from where to where? How does orientation work if it's a spatial condition? So to explore these things in practice, let's quickly run through a project's journey. So this is a little bit a very, very quick and simplified and linear biography of In the Air, which is an ongoing multi-platform collaborative project to make visible and sensible the air's materiality. It was initiated at Media Lab Prado at a visualization workshop curated by José Luis de Vicente in 2008. So it's been a while now. And it was developed, and thanks to an amazing group of collaborators from different origins and disciplinary backgrounds. And the logic went like that. You just show up and produce something. So after 2 weeks of hard work and many clashes, we managed to put together an application that made visible Madrid's air quality from a situated and relational perspective, what I've called later Madrid's atmographies. We also tested what at the time we called a diffuse facade, to bring the data outside personal devices and into the public space. The following year, we got invited by Media Lab Prado to continue developing In the Air at a new iteration of the same workshop. It was much harder because the inventive, the creational part, the emergence of a project wasn't there anymore. And we know how hard it is to shift from inventing something to developing it. And yet, we managed to develop an app for the institution's digital facade and images that integrated Madrid's icons with its air to make the air present and represented as part of the urban landscape. From then, we got invited to develop the app at Media Labs in Budapest, Santiago de Chile, and more realistic iterations for art institutions like this one. And each time there were different demands. No, more realistic. Otherwise people cannot understand that it's Madrid. No, less data. No, more technical. No, this is too technical. No, this is too arty. So this was an art and architecture exhibition, and an art critic who didn't know I was there was saying, this is trivializing air pollution so much. This is so banal. They're not taking it seriously. This is not art. This is whatever. And I was like, I never said it was art in the first place. But still, like, what are we evaluating? And actually, the data that you can see is data from the sensors from that date in Madrid. So in the discussion that we were having this morning between rigor and speculation, objectivity and creativity, how does an intersection like this look like? We also got invited to develop more urban screens, applications, another one for a street experiment for the BBC, the UK's national television. And some years later, we were invited to propose a project on air for the Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism in 2017. They asked us to develop a project in less than 1 week. So we proposed an iteration of Media Lab Prado's diffuse facade and developed Yellow Dust, a spatial infrastructure that monitored, made sensible, and partially remediated particulate matter. Since then, I've been asked for Yellow Dust many times, by many different contexts. But the low budget and harsh environmental conditions of Seoul meant that after 3 months, some of the pieces weren't working anymore, and we didn't have budget to ship back what was remaining. Nevertheless, we won a competition to develop an iteration for Madrid City Council for Imagina Madrid, where we could design with neighbors an ephemeral installation to activate an unused space. I've been invited to present the project in scientific, artistic, architecture, social sciences, interdisciplinary, activist, and institutional settings. And I've written a book, just because I was asked to do so for promotion. So when is it enough? In an academic career, artistic career, architecture career, there's always something lacking, always something missing. Some people consider this biography the biography of a successful and impactful project, or at least the UK's system for assessing the excellence of research in UK higher education providers, so-called the REF, has considered so. So for the REF, this is a really, really successful project. And I wonder, fine, let's assume that, but what made it possible? It's definitely not the conditions of the university. Because things don't happen in the air. They need materials, they need institutions, they need support. Yellow Dust was, in my view, an alignment of the universe, if I can put it like this. Because the production was over the summer, which is the university holidays. That's why we could be there for 3 weeks setting up. We had developed a prototype 8 years ago, so there were some ideas on how to basically imagine a project in 1 week. And I got some funding from the university to pay for travel. And of course, I had an amazing group of collaborators, Raúl, one of them, with whom it wouldn't have been possible at all. But all these iterations needed a space where no disciplinary questions were asked. And this was Media Lab Prado at the beginning. This was a fundamental context for me, to explore questions that didn't have space or literature or knowledge from architecture where I was coming from. But who funds them? How can they have continuity and independence from political shifts? I don't know if you're aware, but in Madrid, the city council from El PP for many years has basically dismantled the institution, considering that actually, who cares, no? So, which are the spaces that are needed? All the iterations have been developed collaboratively and or with different forms of participation. But the classic question that is still not greatly resolved: who can participate? Who can give time with very low fees or none? Who is available? how is it always so homogeneous? And it was quite scary, actually. I don't know if you remember yesterday in Chris Salter's presentation, how every single human that was appearing at the intersection between science and art were white males. Many of them have been co-produced with others, or we have built them ourselves with our hands as well, usually and, which sounds really good on paper, but this means that there's a large amount of free labor that isn't remunerated. So whose free labor is being at work here? I want to also consider as a fundamental aspect of these projects theories and frameworks that have shifted my way of understanding the world, and in particular air, to be more specific. So STS has encouraged me or given me the tools to look carefully at the materiality of things and understand that any object is a socio-technical assemblage that involves technology, society, culture, politics, and so forth. So these are not things that you can just disentangle, and that's why when we're thinking about the intersection between science and arts, inevitably society is always there, politics is always there. The question is whether we pay attention to it or not, whether it matters or not. But also, feminist and queer methods and theories and activisms have been really, really important for me to open up to non-institutionalized forms of knowledge, focus on the politics of knowledge production, actually how we make things, all these processes matter from an ethical perspective, to look for what is not in the picture, the power relations, to challenge categories, or to put inequality and oppressions at the center. In the case of yellow dust, this meant to pay attention to what matters in soul, which was particulate matter, to reflect on where sensing takes place, to shift from fast communication to embodied experiences of data, towards slow forms of interaction, built with off-the-shelf materials, so that it could be assembled by any group who would like to make their air visible, and explore how, instead of making things simpler, we could make them more complex. But I think that it's also important to consider the assumed externalities, and here we're using economics language, that are often taken for granted in these projects. Like, oh, well, this is what you need to do, right? And I hear this a lot when I try to explain the requirements that a project like this might have when people ask for it, either at university or somewhere else. And this is not to complain and say that our lives are hard, but more importantly, and I think for me this is like really fundamental, to take seriously what it takes to develop these projects. First, there's a borrowing of space and time from others. So friendship, generosity, again, Raúl Nieves gave it all because he's an amazing human being. And then is this type of people that just like do it, right? But if you don't find these people, it doesn't happen. So there's a massive investment, a personal investment and luck in being able to collaborate with these kind of people. There's a lot of experimentation that isn't paid for. So everyone wants to pay the minimum, and then therefore they say, just give us the product and we'll pay for the product. But you don't know the product in advance because everything is site-specific and has been developed from scratch. The contexts are fragile, and we tend to take, or are made to adapt to these changing conditions. Sometimes they're economic, sorry, we ran out of money, and some others, for example, like in Seoul, they were supposed to have finished the refurbishment of the site, and then they hadn't. And that meant that we didn't have what was promised to us. So we needed to adapt, change the project, and be really, really, really stressed because it was not going to happen, even though, and of course you are the face that shows, that is there when the curators come and check why is this not running. So where does our responsibility stop? And this is something that I ask myself very often. Squeezed budgets mean that the working conditions are precarious. One can pay very little to participants, to collaborators, which is always really embarrassing. And this doesn't mean that we need like 5-star hotels at all, but also to take into consideration that being 3 weeks without a window is emotional labor. And very often we put our bodies to exhaustion. And to be honest, I was wondering when looking at this image, I couldn't do it now with my perimenopause. It wouldn't be possible. So how sustainable are these practices? Can only young people do them? But something that I've been hearing often these 2 days, and Carla Moulins-Pitarch this morning made it specific, used these exact words. We are living in the not enough, because what we do is never enough for anyone. It is not good art, not good science, not a stable technology. And one would say, well, actually, who cares? But it does matter, because it depends whether you get funding. And when I ask for funding, grants from UKRI or the EU, they always come back saying, it's lovely, but not exactly humanities. Not social sciences, but then everyone wants the images. So how do we deal with that contradiction? You want the images, but you don't want to pay for it. So where do we stand? And does that mean that there's no belonging? And it was really beautiful to see that we've been in a bubble these days, but at least it feels that it's a collective space, which doesn't happen often. And then, and this was a reflection when I was finishing writing the book, I realized that actually all this was possible in part because it requires a flexibility and an agility, I would say, that at least in my case, this biography only happened because I was floating in the air, I suppose. But you're never anchored to one point because you cannot commit to anything because you never know when you're going to have to do something else. So that availability is really, really, really difficult when one decides to anchor and engage with further responsibilities. So how does one care for oneself, as Joel Ong mentioned yesterday? And how does one make a living? So I am going to highlight a couple of conditions that I think would be, that are needed in order to engage with this, in order to facilitate, support, enhance, and trigger or encourage processes like these ones. Obviously, the first one is new funding opportunities. Surprise. But these new funding opportunities require very specific conditions. They need to include time invested, and this has been repeated over and over these 2 days, to create a shared vocabulary, getting to know each other. And we've seen examples that have taken this very, very seriously, and it's been beautiful, but everyone has mentioned, yes, but it took us a long time. To include experimentation, not only in time, but also in budgets. Include per-action funding, and fund the practitioners. New evaluation criteria, as we've seen in the panel before. But also, who evaluates? Do the evaluators need to be like us? Who is like us? and to consider and have very clear, and this is something that is always, and it's been so different throughout the symposium, what do we do it for? Is it this dichotomy that Chris Salter was mentioning the first day between innovation and invention? Are we doing to test possible futures? A science communication? What is the aim of each of these projects? And does each of these aims require a different evaluation criteria? What does success look like? Does it need to be internal to each project, or can there be a framework? All new funding, I don't know here in Spain, but at least in the UK and in the European grants that I applied for, they always require impact, obviously, and participation and engagement. But then, who are these others? Who are these communities? Who gets paid? Or actually, who doesn't get paid? How can they get paid? None of these grants allow you to pay for participants. So which kind of fantasy are we living in? It is just not, I mean, it's a question that I ask myself, and for me, it is not fair. Because it's externalizing labor. And of course, there's many people who are interested and want something out of it. But time is time. The timing of projects is also fundamental, and this becomes very clear when developing digital technologies, for example, because you need to update the software. In the case of In the Air, for example, because we were scraping the data from the city council, every time the city council changes their web page, the address of the web page will lose the access to the data, and then therefore maintenance becomes something fundamental, but it's never accounted for, because everything is to invent, to start. This fantasy of innovation and creativity that actually doesn't consider the involvement and the material conditions and the economic conditions that are needed in order to maintain and keep a project running. Who deals with the legacy? Can maintenance be integrated within the funding and further processes? It's also really important to consider institutional stability, to build up a culture, whilst opening up who and how contributes. And again, this is really important. We depend so much on political cycles that institutions just don't have the capacity to sustain and develop processes of common understanding, process of mentorship, communication and transmission of ideas. Everything gets lost every time an institution gets closed. And new forms of authorship, where everyone can take credit. Because if you think about it, to include everything and everyone that has participated in a project ends up being like 3 paragraphs. In which context are 3 paragraphs considered authorship? In the arts, you'd better not, because you need to be a single author or a team maximum. If you're in the humanities, forget about it as well. In the social sciences, they don't like it either. So in the sciences, fine, but in the sciences, they would never consider this authorship. And therefore, where does this count? And how can we be fair so that authorship is also a description of the history of the project? And for whom are we doing it? Who benefits? Can we redistribute the benefits? Not only in terms of funding, obviously, but also in terms of credit, in terms of knowledge. And I think we also need new narratives. In the session before, there was an interesting conversation about understanding the impact and measuring the impact so that one can explain to others why this is important. But I think we also need new narratives on why this matters, these intersections or these encounters or these battlefields. Because they take a lot of effort and time. So how can we explain the need for them that goes beyond impact? And again, impact is really fundamental, but can we create more exciting narratives, and I don't find a better word, so that everyone gets on board in a more open and in a more open way, and also understanding that these are practices and these are labor and these are lives. Thank you.
So thank you so much. I love when a conference ends more or less with more questions than answers. And thank you for bringing it really to the ground, these topics, and posting diverse other questions that we hadn't considered here till now. I want to invite now Laura Benítez to respond, because I guess there's some things to respond. And well, Laura Benítez, she has a PhD in philosophy. She's a researcher, she's a university lecturer. As a philosopher, she connects philosophy, arts, and technoscience. She has an amazing curriculum as a lecturer. So, as she's associate professor at the Department of Philosophy at the Autònoma University of Barcelona. She also teaches at Elisava. She has served as a coordinator of the theory area in the arts and design degree at Massana. She has been visiting research at the Arts Electronica Center and the Center for Studies and Documentation in MACBA. She has collaborated with diverse cultural institutions international, so some of them are here. So it's Arts Electronica, it's Kersnikova. And she did the Royal Academy of Arts also in London, and she did an amazing project a couple of years ago in Angar, together with BioArt Society, Cultivamos Cultura, from Marta Benítez y Kersnikova, and Kersnikova, sorry. And she's also co-director of the Master on Design for Emergent Cultures. So yeah, Laura, you have plenty of ground to respond to these challenging proposals.
Super. Well, hi everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for your talk. Very needed from my perspective. So I was taking a lot of notes, so I will try to refer to some of your open questions and also to some of the things that we've been commenting these days. So as you heard, I come from philosophy. So as you know, people from philosophy, we have this particular obsession with language and the use of language. So we've been talking quite a lot on ethics, responsibility, quite a lot on epistemologies and care. So I will try to connect some of your open questions to some other things. So precisely related to your talk and, you know, like your work, and this perspective based on transfeminism, no, like rethinking interdisciplinarity from there, and connecting interdisciplinarity with intersectionality, which, you know, what for me it's key, and precisely connected to ethics and responsibility and response-ability. Mainly because I think that, you know, the use of language can be very tricky, and it can even be quite perverse in order to, you know, to promote washing in general terms and to transform pretty crucial questions into hypes or trends or cultural artifacts, no? So, for example, I was thinking, no, of some of your questions and the way in which you've been presenting them, and also trying to think of some specific examples that you already mentioned happening these days, no? For example, yesterday, we saw a presentation of masculine genealogy, and beyond intention, when we are facing this kind of presentations, we are nourishing epistemic violence. So what happens there, for example, with responsibility, no, in this sense? So I was also trying to connect some of your questions, for example, the key question on labor. No, I think that some of the questions, like share these 2 days within this symposium are necessarily connected to the material conditions of research, knowledge making, and presences and absences, as you already said before. And precisely, I was thinking of this report that was published in March, if I'm not wrong, this year by the ASTS Foundation, the 5th Social Labor Report, remarking that in 2023, so last year, the 72% of artists in Spain, Spanish state, or the Kingdom of Spain, choose your terminology, were and unfortunately are below the poverty line. So the labor is key, no? And the 48% of professionals in this sector earn less than 3,000 euros per year. So that's the situation, no? And I guess that symposiums and programs such as the START, it makes sense in order to transform, no? To the commitment to transform or to help to transform these material conditions in terms of labor, no? Which is also connected to intersectionality. So, and another thing that I wanted to mention is regarding your project, your collaborative project on air and toxicities, no? And I was thinking precisely on, again, the use of language, because the use of language, it gives us a lot of clues, like material clues of how we are working with whom, no? And resources and so on, no? And for example, before these talks, I was listening to some of the videos outside, and in one of the videos, there was this mention to epistemic toxicities, no? And it reminded me quite a lot to one thing that it's been happening these days with a politician using toxic subjectivity in order to hide, no, his behaviors as an euphemism in terms of abuse of power, sexual harassment. So precisely trying to connect all these things that we've been mentioning, no, in terms of responsibility and toxicity. I think that your approach to toxicity, it really opens critical cracks in order to, to try to articulate different possibilities from this trans-feminist and then intersectional perspective, like an embodied commitment, but also some specific uses of toxicity can be quite perverse, such as the one that I already mentioned, because these uses precisely are displacing subjectivity or epistemologies, or even transforming subjectivity or epistemology into adjectives, and then displacing agency, and using toxicity as an euphemism to hide quite problematic practices. Same with all the so-called silence structures in order to hold these quite problematic behaviors, no? So when you were mentioning these encounters, no, and this commitment to try to, for example, to try to articulate new forms of authorship, and then this redistribution of benefits, no, which is directly related to material conditions of knowledge making. I was also thinking that this is a really key question, no, because well, I think that the majority of us, for example, one thing that I'm missing these days in here is a lot of artists from Barcelona. And if they are not here, it's precisely because of these material conditions that we already mentioned, no? Because they don't have proper time in order to be here, because they have some other jobs, no? In the majority of the cases, quite precarious and quite, so artists are in a quite vulnerable situation. So to what extent we can think of the so-called epistemic justice if we depart from completely unequal material conditions, no? So I think that all these questions are really key, because if not, we are all the time, like using language, and again, it's beyond intention, but we are using language in order to transform critical questions into cultural hypes, like cultural artifacts produced within the so-called cultural industries. And then we are blurring bodies, we are erasing bodies, we are erasing a specific conditions. So, and we have ethical responsibilities on that. And at least from my perspective, what really matters is this embodied commitment, no? Like holding contradictions. Of course, we all know that we are holding contradictions. It is what it is. We are, for example, within the Interdisciplinary, we are working with public money coming from the European Commission. I've been listening to, like some of you talking about biopolitics, necropolitics. I think that at least when I was here, nobody mentioned thanatopolitics, but okay, more or less. And at the same time, we have this agency, the European agency Frontex, which is a quite biopolitical, necropolitical, and thanatopolitical agency. Okay, so we are holding these contradictions. So what makes sense is not trying to hide, not trying to turning into invisible, no, these presences in terms of resources. So, so at least from my perspective, all these things are really, really key and really, really important to try to not reproduce all these things that we are trying to address from a critical perspective. And for that reason, at least it seemed to me so key, your presentation, like embracing intersectionality with interdisciplinarity, so intersections with intersectionality, and then, interdisciplinarity with intersectional perspectives, and then this maybe some other possible encounters, no? Like really taking care, not capitalizing care as a new trend topic for producing projects and so on, but really being, like situated. So, for example, as I was saying, within the context of Barcelona, artists in general, also researchers at the universities, is radically different to work for a private university than for a public university. But even researchers at the university, they are lacking of proper resources in order to research, no? So when you are facing all the time these really difficulties, like these material difficulties, to think of epistemic justice, for example, is extremely complicated, no? And same with decolonial, we've been listening to different proposals, and of course I completely convinced that we really need to decolonize knowledge-making structures, academia. But academia, for example, as some artistic institutions, has the two worst sides of, on one hand, feudalism, and on the other hand, neoliberalism, okay? Same with some artistic institutions. So to be aware of our privileges in order to, so what is our place of enunciation? That for me is key, no? Like, of course, I'm pretty aware of the need of decolonizing, but at the same time being aware that decolonizing is not a metaphor. It's a pretty complex, a pretty complex process with historical responsibilities, reparation, all the things that we all know, but the majority of us, we are not suffering, and that difference matters. and matters quite a lot. So how to use these possibilities, no? Like the STARTS, public money coming from the European Union in order to try to transform some material conditions and to try to open micro cracks of possibility, but not trying to hide the elephant in the room, no? All the multiple violent vectors, no? Displacing agencies, responsibilities, and so on. That's, well, a general.
So I think it deserves. So I think it's your turn. Probably you have something to respond, because I think that you're starting an amazing dialogue also, and also on the sense of what we are doing and about what we are talking about, which is this merging, bringing together diverse communities, diverse ways of thinking, diverse processes, diverse material conditions. So it's now.
Well, thank you so much. It's difficult because you cannot put it better than this. So I don't know. I mean, I really appreciate your emphasis on the working conditions, because it's a topic that it's like boring, no? I get at uni, people are like, "You're always complaining, just but it's so beautiful." It's like, but like we manage the budgets, we need to do it on our holidays. And this is from privilege, as you say, from maximum privilege, because I managed to get a permanent position. So these themes for me are absolutely fundamental, and I think how the way you phrased it, to use the public funding to open micro cracks of possibility, for me that's the real opportunity of projects like this one, to see if we can model other ways of being, other ways of doing, other types of infrastructures. So thank you so much for making such an emphasis on those aspects, because they're never nice, and they're not easy to resolve either, because sometimes you encounter the best admin managers that say, we really want to do it, but there's all these regulations now in the UK, for example, with the right to work, you just forget about it. Like, you cannot even invite someone to give a talk, let alone collaborate in a project. So the multiscalarity of these challenges, I think, makes them even harder. And yet, these larger grants are really great opportunities to start building other models. So thank you so much.
And don't you think that so we have been talking from the artistic point of view, but what happens with infrastructures, so scientific infrastructures, academic infrastructures? Because we are only seeing, so this is a transdisciplinary approach, so this is something that it's in between all these infrastructures. Do you think, so what is your experience in both in academia, in scientific research centers, in terms of not only material conditions, but also power structures, administrative structures, and so on? I mean, so this is not only the arts, that it's...
Absolutely. And I think epistemic toxicities together with epistemic justice is absolutely crucial, because I was speaking with Ira and Tomás Sánchez-Criado before, and when I'm working with scientists, I've been the youngest in academic terms, and the only one that is not a scientist. I mean, the lack of respect is unbelievable. The epistemic toxicity, like, whatever it is that you do, just like, I don't know, like make it nice. Just make it nice. And then you do what you can, and then they say, oh, but that's really ugly. Because they know better.
Mm.
They know everything. And you're like, but I'm the expert here. And they're like, nah, there's no expertise in the arts. There's no, and I play, so all the leftovers of what is not the hardcore is this other that is basically making pretty and community engagement. So, and this happens in these type of collaborations, then there's no funding for organizations who collaborate. So how to distribute the money? Many of my colleagues, what everyone is trying to do is how to distribute the money, because it comes from the government. But of course, the universities try to grab it because they've been neoliberalized. So they say, we need the money for our overheads. But then, so who pays the NGOs that everyone needs in their project as partners? They don't get paid. How is that possible? Like, it's extraction.
Absolutely.
It's 100% extraction. So this small bureaucratic, but you need to find someone who believes in it and is willing to navigate hell in order to circumvent administrative and this policing. Like, what if we get asked for this paper? And of course, racism in hiring processes, discrimination of all sorts, you name it. So I think, of course, coming from privilege, so in my experience, it happens all across different spaces, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, same. Totally agree. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of infrastructure, so there's so many things extremely complex. But I was thinking, for example, on what happens at the public universities in here and probably generally in the public universities across Europe in terms of infrastructures. And, you know, like it's another layer of transforming or keeping the precariousness of artists, students, and so on. So, for example, the thing that we all are using private technological corporations. And that's, for me, it's like, when we are going to change these and to, you know, to fund like open platforms, because what is happening, as you were mentioning this, well, before this morning, with data, no? And this being all the time this new cognitariat, it's pretty related to this infrastructural thing, not to mention power relations. So personally, even being in a super privileged position, I've been facing quite extreme problems in terms of power relations at the university. So I resigned together with 5 teachers from a university for political reasons and gender things. So what to say that once again, being a killjoy, as you mentioned, is exhausting. So even, you know, like even bearing into account all these problems, all these things, all these situations, even that, I defend that being there. So I agree with bell hooks that even, you know, like the perverse structure of the academia, also, you know, the use of bureaucracy as exhaustion, as a way, as a pretty effective way of domination, even being pretty aware of that. I think that class is a place of possibilities in potential, so it makes sense in terms of political commitment with the students and knowledge transfer and knowledge making, because it's not so, but it's quite complicated.
Yeah, so we were missing also here among the participants of in this symposium artists, but as well scientists. So from pure sciences, so I mean natural sciences, biology, and so on. So there's something, so that's, it's okay, because we are creating this symposium in the frame of the discussion of this STARTS program and the STARTS in the City project. So it's okay. I guess there's some languages that we need to, or some messages that we need to bring forward, just to get them also on board in these discussions, because I think it's a frame of the discussions. That's what it is, the symposium. But I guess so. I don't know. I guess there's many questions here, or many, I don't know. So we are almost in the closing words, but it's not our closing words, but it's your closing words. So you can ask questions and to both of you. So you have any question here in the room? Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
But I was hearing my words that when I'm assessing the situation as well. But now when I'm listening to you from the stage, no, what would be your suggestion to young people who are thinking to start studying for arts?
My suggestion would be, please do it. If you want to study arts, please do it, but be aware of the material conditions in terms of labor. But I think that we must fight for artists' rights, researchers. So I think that it's a collective fight and commitment. So I would say, if you want to study arts, please do it. If you want to do projects, please do it. But please try to be active in terms of political realm, embodiment, and try to cooperate and try to demystify, for example, this notion of authorship in terms of hyper-individualism, because you are never thinking alone, writing alone, generating philosophical thinking alone, or artistic practices alone. No, we've been always actively dialoguing with trans-historical voices in different territories, in different, I don't know, scales, and not only with humans, as you know pretty well. So I would say, please do it, but be aware of these presences, absences, latencies, and try to enjoy the process, but being pretty aware of the material conditions in order to have the... So I would say, if you want to transform something, you really know to understand how it works. Because if not, there's no possible transformation. So
did you try already?
I'm trying all the time, but you see, I told you that being a killjoy is exhausting. So it almost killed me 2 years ago. So, but keep trying, yes. I think that it's an existential battle, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And I would say also that one of the challenges, I think, in a context like, at least in the Spanish state, is that disciplines are like things forever and ever in your life. So you just, it feels as if you just embody a discipline, or but the skills that you learn, and skill is a horrible word, but the way in which the brain gets trained is really powerful. So who says that one needs to end up doing whatever, sculptures? Like an artist can contribute immensely in so many different contexts, as we've been seeing these days. So I think there's also something about the narratives of what these encounters can provide, where one can inhabit more undefined contexts, but use all that training for really great projects.
There's another question over there.
Yeah, thank you, and especially thank you to Laura to say the truth about the situation of the living situation of the artist. So maybe it's a question for you, but also probably for everybody that is writing at the higher level the calls and how to manage. Sorry, okay, how to manage all the funding. So do you know any way, or can you imagine that how to involve these artists that cannot leave their job for 3-6 months to make a residency? So there could be a way to be more inclusive, maybe also towards these artists. Thank you.
I mean, ideally, one of the challenges is the extreme competition in every environment, in every field, and I think inclusivity, like an intersectional inclusivity, means that one doesn't choose the artist, in this case, that has the largest production and the largest amount of exhibitions, but project-based. And that might mean that maybe it can go to someone who has had less chances because they've had to work always. And of course, this is a class issue, amongst other things. But ideally, there will be grants from the government saying, well, you can go back to your job, like I'm just thinking out loud, but like maternity leave, well, you just need to go to a residency, but maybe they need to assure that you get your job back. Or so I think we can be creative, but we would have to change the hierarchy of what matters and what art does, for example. Like what does, and this is going to sound horrible, but like there's maternity leave, now there's paternity leave, but there's not other leaves. So would there be artistic leave? Why not? It's just, we just need to be creative about it.
No, is there any question? Because maybe you want to also answer this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, answer.
Well.
The solution
Unfortunately,
is...
I don't have a solution. But no, I was thinking of, for example, the super important work that some platforms and associations have been doing and are doing. For example, the Visual Artists Union and the PAC, la Plataforma Assembleària d'Artistes de Catalunya. So I think that all these platforms are key in order to really to claim the proper labor conditions for artists and the proper recognition, no, of artistic work. Because even sometimes, and some of you already mentioned that, when there's these intersections in between science and artistic practices, not always at all, but sometimes the ones doing scientific research in some specific scientific centers or universities think at some point that these artistic practices are tools in order to, you know, to facilitate the comprehension of their extremely complex scientific theories, like how it's called, divulgación.
Yeah, knowledge transfer,
Dissemination.
dissemination.
Yeah, dissemination.
Knowledge, you know, like using artistic practices as tools in order to disseminate and to simplify, in a way, a scientific knowledge, no? So I think that we really need the proper structures. Maybe even nowadays unions need to be re-articulated, no, within the 21st century. But I think that as any worker we need proper platforms in order to have the knowledge, to have the tools. So, for example, to know your rights, to have legal knowledge as well, or well, accompaniment, no? Like, so I would say that at least it seems to me, I'm not an artist, but it seems to me that these platforms are key in order to have a network supporting you and, you know, fighting for your rights as a worker. Because if not, I think that you are always kind of relegated to some compassion or something like this.
I have a question for both of you. So, because we have been talking about infrastructures and now material conditions, don't you think that there's maybe a relation between not having the infrastructure to do artistic research or transdisciplinary research strong enough to be able not to give grants, but to contract researchers from any field? So is there a relation? Because it's, of course, this is a artist, okay, they are mostly working alone and they are left alone also. But I think that the lack of infrastructure, so we have academia, you can do research in the academia, you have the research center, scientific research centers, you are also contracted, you have to compete, of course, it's, competition is everywhere. But we do really have enough centers for researching, because we have been wondering, so all the day on the role of the potential these STARTS regional centers. So how do they look like in the best case scenario for you? So maybe you have the best solution.
Give me 2 days and
Okay. Okay.
no, I don't know. For me, for example, I've mentioned it, but a place like Media Lab Prado in Madrid, the old Media Lab, and now they're really still trying the Media Lab Matadero, but it was a space, it was an open space that had this art, science, and technology in the title, but they were very focused on collaborative processes, the commons, and so, and then they enabled groups, and then they gave space. So sometimes it's like space, some workshops to bring people in, some funding to develop some things. Some people might argue, well, you cannot develop the projects, they're only prototypes. Well, maybe we need a development phase or institution or wing of these institutions. But I think places where no one asks why does it matter, who's going to benefit, and one can just like try out things, for me are really crucial, because also one can learn. Like I've learned so much politically, in terms of collaborative processes, methods, so they're nurturing a lot at so many levels. They're creating communities of practice. And it doesn't, I mean, yeah, you need a building, you need to pay for the energy consumption and whatnot, but well, it depends on who funds it, but still the council says they need to pay. No, of course. But I think public funding for these kind of spaces is really, really important, to bring in, to open up collaboration, to open up who contributes and who participates and who can come in.
Yeah, no, totally agree. In fact, I was thinking, you mentioned Matadero, Media Lab, so I was thinking of Hangar here in Barcelona. So for me, that's been key, even for me, you know, in my career, also in my life. So these research centers where your symbolic capital is not key in order to be able to participate in knowledge making, knowledge transfer. This is extremely important, because if not, then once and, you know, like you are reproducing all the structures. So I would say we don't need more centers. We We would need to transform the ones that we already have. No? So, for example, for me, in my case, it's a bit weird because I love teaching. I love, like being with students because it's a learning space. We are all learning. But the majority of my research, which this my is not only me with all the ones that we've been doing research together, it's been happening outside the academia in places such as Angar. And for me, personally, there's much more philosophical, active, embodied, and committed thinking and philosophical production in that spaces than in the academia. So that would be my answer.
So thank you so much. No more questions here? No? So now it's time of the time of the closing words. Maybe someone wants to say something before we finish. You know these famous last words. Come on, people. I'm sure you have famous last words to leave us here as thoughts for the next our next future. No? Yes, Jerry. Thank you so much.
Because we are now we build a structure, and this structure supports making a space for creatives to create. We develop production platforms and spaces and critical infrastructures that it's enabling creation. We even succeed to persuade politics to give money to that. And I'm start seeing the hell coming, because we did this structure, which is putting all the blocks in order, but this is not how art it's happening, because art is happening exactly in open structure, where there is this certain anxiety that it's driving you, and it's a drive. It goes beyond comfort. And what I'm seeing now, and this is what I was asking before, how do you envision a future artist coming? Because nowadays, working with I'm an NGO. So we are not working according to the public schedule. And already when we are working with academies and with the students, you cannot ask them to work more than 8 hours. We do camps or I don't know, workshops that are like several days. You shouldn't work with them in the weekends. So one in a sudden, these workers' rights, are promised all over the place, and it fits in this structure, which allows them to be paid, to ask them for their space and so on and so on. And we came in a certain moment, that we have an opening at 8 in the evening, and it's perceived as an extra hour activity. So, we organized as artists and NGOs already in 90s. We built an association which has a lot of members. All our, let's say, bullet points, that are crucial bullet points that we were fighting for, are now at the ministry, where the most prominent members from the association are now working, and they write a national program for culture, which is from 2017, the first national program that will be accepted, and our bullets are in. They write an action plan for next 3 years, and our bullets are in. They are changing, together with us, the law, 1/3 of the law, which is the biggest law organizing our culture sector, and so on. I see the grit, I see the structure there, I see, you know, what we succeed, but when I'm looking back, there are no new NGOs, because young people looking at us, they don't want to be like us. They don't want to struggle. They don't want to be, you know, constantly on the barrier fighting and so on. They want to make their fine art. No? And, you know, from 7 to 3. So this is why I was asking, you know, like, we have to have a certain dichotomy there. I strongly oppose the belief that poor artist is good artist. No? But what I see working with artists now is that if we give them a budget of 30,000 euro for the project, they cannot make it. They interiorized this low K production so profoundly, you know, they can't commit over certain level, no? So, and also other NGOs, our partners, for example, no, because they would need to step out, they would need to fight, they would need to talk loud, they would need to bump on the doors and so on. They interiorize their misery, and they're functioning perfectly in their small gardens, you know, having no extra responsibility than just tinkering with things. No? So this is what I'm afraid.
This reminds me a very nice story about, of course, German researchers. They were just, and it was at the beginning of the last century. So, and they were researching a group of ants, and they were noticing that a group of ants, part of them, they were doing nothing at all. And they thought, okay, maybe if we take these ants, we can raise the productivity. It's going to be 100% colony of productive ants. Okay, they did it. They took the non-productive ants away, and suddenly, in both groups, the non-productive and the productive started to change things. So there was in the productive, 100% productive ants, a group decided to do nothing. And from the 100% non-productive ants, a group decided to do something. So I think it's a very nice story in how to, you know, so who is here necessary, who is not, which is the efforts that we need to do. Maybe some efforts has, and at one time, transiting, you know, positions, transiting actions as well. I think it's one way to go. So if there's nothing else, I leave you with this nice story. I love it. So
it's beautiful.
I love it.
It's beautiful.
So thank you so much to all of you. And then I think we have some wine, and I hope you did enjoy this symposium. I did. So thank you so much.
Thank you.